Okay, as we begin today, I start with Canvas. We are in the new chapter 4. I want to just remind you that you should download or print, download at least, print if you can, the 4.1 guided notes before watching the video and going through chapter 4, as they will help you with a lot of the pictures and a lot of the fill-ins. 4.1 and chapter 4 is all about exploring what scatter plots are. So a scatter plot shows the relationship between two quantitative variables measured on the same individuals. So in chapter 1, we learned what an individual was. An individual is the person that the data describes, and a variable is the measured data. Last chapter, we did all we could in chapter 2 to look at one variable at a time. We looked at numerical and categorical. This chapter 4 just looks at two numerical variables at the same time. So, we have typically we have an explanatory variable and a response variable. Our explanatory variable is typically the x variable, and our response variable is typically the y variable. If we think that one of the variables either comes first or explains the other variable, it should be the x. If the variable either comes second or is in response to the x, it is the y. There are times when we simply look at the relationship between variables. So we could just explore two variables. If nothing explains the other, or we're not sure if one explains the other, you simply say we're just exploring the two values and variables, and there is no defined explanatory or response. That's the neither right here. So what we're going to look at first is what do we do when we interpret a scatter plot. Now remember, a scatter plot, where I'm circling right now, a scatter plot is where you have some sort of number variable on the x, another number variable on the y, and wherever the points match, they get a dot. So if you have one variable, the person scored a 50, and then the same person scored an 80 over here, they would be 50 comma 80, and they would be a dot. So this is plotting x comma y points to make a scatter plot. So when you look at a scatter plot, just like regular data, we look for the overall pattern and we look for departures, or called deviations, from that pattern. So the first thing we're always going to have to do is either make a picture or look at a picture. So just a quick reminder, when you're going to making a scatter plot, how is a scatter plot made? We would have, so I'll just do a very quick one, we would have individual, and each individual, we'll call them individual 1, individual 2, individual 3. Let's say we were looking at two tests. We had test chapter 1 and test chapter 2 scores. And then for each individual, you had their scores. Maybe this person did a 55 and a 50. Maybe this person was a 90 and an 85. And then this person was a 70 and a 90. So we see here that each of these makes up a point. And then a scatter plot works where you pick one on the test 1 happened first, so this would be our x. Test 2 happened second, so this would be our y. And then they both go 0 to 100 and 0 to 100. And then we would plot, I know that because of a test, it's 0 out of 100. You plot each point. So an x at 55 and a y at 50, person 1 would be here. An x at 90 and a y at 85 would be about here. And then we have an x at 70 right between them, and a y at 90 up here. So scatter plots go by x and y, and each person, each individual, gets a point. For Once you finish making a scatter plot, you look for the overall pattern, which we will call the form, the direction, the strength of the scatter plot. And then we look for deviations, which we still call outliers. So, in general, when you look at a scatter plot, I always say, you always talk about the FODS. FODS. F is for form, outliers, direction, and strength. We will talk about each one of those today, and it's when you're looking at a scatter plot, what do you see? So we start with form. We're going to make it each very easy. How would you answer form? You have basically only 3 options for form. Linear form. And I will tell you right away, almost always, almost everyone, or almost always, the answer is linear form. For this chapter, it's like 99% of the questions. So, is the scatter plot linear? What does linear form look like? It means if you look at the scatter plot, can you kind of see, you could kind of put a line through the points. Okay, if you look at these points, you can definitely look like you could put something through them, but it is not a line. And in here, you see like it looks like it wants to curve up here, but it also has something going on here, so no pattern. So for form, your only answers are going to be linear, and your only other answer choice, which would make up for both of these, would be not linear. Your only answers for form should be linear and not linear. That's all you should ever answer on a test. Linear and not linear. That's for form. Direction. Direction is very, very easy to see when you're looking at a picture. If it looks like the data is heading up, then the direction is positive. If the data is heading down, then the direction is negative. And what I'm saying is you always look from left to right. So look from the start, head to the right. What's the direction? Well, in this case, it's up. From the start, heading right, this direction is down. So positive direction, negative direction. We use the word association because it says, the points are associated in a positive direction. We don't use the word really slope here for direction because slope is only once there really is a line. And on a scatter plot, the line comes later. It starts as just points. So again, a scatter plot, remember, think scatter, it's just points. No line yet on a scatter plot. So that's why we say positive association for the direction or negative association for the direction. If you want to add this, it'll be important later. Positive association means r greater than 0 and r less than 0 for negative. We'll talk about r at a later date, but it's good to keep it related here. Because a lot of people say, oh, this is positive correlation. Correlation comes later, but it is very much the same. Positive association, positive correlation go together. You don't want to just say positive slope. If there's no line, don't use the word slope. The last one, form, direction, strength. We'll talk about outliers later, but they're very obvious. Outliers are something far away from the rest. Strength is how closely do the points follow a clear form. So since we're really only dealing with linear, I'm not even going to talk about this one. But what you can see here is we're saying how close to these points can you envision a line? Okay? How close on these points can you envision a line? How close, and you see the line here, can you envision this line? Now I'm going to tell you options for strength. Your options for strength are going to be from most to least, you're going to either be able to say strong, you're going to say moderately strong, you're going to say moderate, you're going to say moderately weak, or you're going to say weak. Those are really the only 5 options: strong, moderate, moderately weak, and weak for the strength of a straight line relationship. We're really only dealing with lines. So over here, these points look very, very strong, so I would call it a strong strength. Here, they are still quite strong, but I still see some floaters, so this would be moderately strong. Here it is negative, but that has nothing to do with the strength. The strength here, there are some floating points. You can sort of see the line, so I would say moderate. Don't worry about curved. We really won't get to strength if the data is not linear. Linear data is what we're working with this chapter. So form, outliers, direction, strength. Okay? Outliers we'll talk about later, but in general, just a quick so you can get the whole idea of FODS. If you had a scatter plot and the points look like this, but then you had a point over here, and you had points all up here and then one point here, that's what you're looking for if you see an outlier. It's a point far away from the rest. This is going to be our assignment after you take your reading check in, your video check quiz. So you're going to head to Canvas and take your Section 1 video check.